In January of the year 897, the Pope had his predecessor dug up. The predecessor had been dead for 9 months. They dressed the body in full papal robes and propped it on a throne. Then they put it on trial. The corpse was given a defense lawyer. The corpse lost. This is the Cadaver Synod, the single strangest event in the history of the papacy, and every part of what you just heard is real. It gets worse. The trial was interrupted by an earthquake, and everyone involved chose to ignore it. And the backfire was so complete that Rome went through 9 popes in 8 years. We will be counting. First, context. The 890s were the worst possible time to be pope. Charlemagne's empire had collapsed and every warlord in Italy wanted the pope to crown him emperor. Being pope in this decade had roughly the job security of a mayfly. Enter Formosus. His name is Latin for good-looking. Hold that thought, it gets darker later. Formosus was Bishop of Porto and, by all accounts, genuinely good at his job. He ran missions to Bulgaria, and the Bulgarians liked him so much they formally asked to keep him. The Pope said no because of a rule: a bishop was married to his diocese for life. 1 diocese per bishop. No transfers ever. This rule is the entire story. Keep it in mind. Formosus then got tangled in Roman politics, was excommunicated, fled, got pardoned, and came back. And in 891, at age 75, he was elected pope, which, remember the rule, meant transferring from the Diocese of Porto to the Diocese of Rome. Technically against the rule. Everyone ignored it because everyone liked him. Then he had to pick an emperor. This is where it goes wrong. The local option was Lambert of Spoleto, a teenage duke with a terrifying mother named Agiltrude. Formosus crowned Lambert co-emperor, under duress. Then he secretly wrote to a king north of the Alps named Arnulf, "Please invade Italy and be emperor instead." Arnulf invaded, took Rome, and got crowned Emperor number 2 of the same empire at the same time. Then Arnulf had a stroke and went home, and in April 896, Formosus died at 79 of natural causes, which in this era counts as a miracle. He left behind 1 furious duke, 1 furious duke mom, and a legal time bomb. The next pope was Boniface VI, elected by a mob. He lasted 15 days. Gout, probably. Nobody wrote much down. Nobody had time. Then came Stephen VI. Remember this man. Stephen owed his job to the Spoleto family, angry Lambert and his even angrier mother. They wanted Formosus punished for the second emperor thing. Formosus being dead was not considered an obstacle. But Stephen had his own reason. It's the good one. Years earlier, it was Formosus who had made Stephen a bishop. And under the no-transfer rule, a bishop could not become pope. Stephen was a bishop. You see the problem. But if Formosus had never legitimately been pope, then nothing he did counted, which meant Stephen had never really been a bishop, which meant Stephen was free to be pope. All he had to do was convict a corpse. So, in January 897, they dug him up. 9 months dead. They dressed the body in full papal vestments. They propped him on a throne in the Lateran Basilica, the Pope's own cathedral. And they appointed a junior deacon to stand beside the corpse and answer questions on its behalf. Take a moment to appreciate this man's day. He did not apply for this. The charges: perjury, coveting the papacy, and the big one, violating the transfer rule by leaving Porto to become pope. Pope Stephen prosecuted personally. Accounts say he screamed at the corpse. The corpse maintained its composure. The deacon speaking for the defendant mounted what historians describe as a brief defence. Mid-trial, an earthquake hit Rome. The Lateran, the courtroom itself, partially collapsed. If you're waiting for a sign from God, your courtroom collapsing during your corpse trial is a strong candidate. Stephen pressed on. Verdict: guilty on all counts. The sentence was thorough. Formosus was retroactively unpoped. Everything he did as pope, void, including every priest and bishop he had ever ordained. Half the clergy of Rome got unordained overnight. Administratively, a catastrophe. Then they stripped the corpse of its vestments and dressed it in ordinary clothes. Then they cut off the 3 fingers of his right hand, the blessing fingers. Apparently the concern was that the corpse might keep blessing people. They buried him in a graveyard for foreigners. Then Stephen thought about it some more, had him dug up again, tied weights to the body and threw it in the Tiber. Running total for this one man: buried, dug up, buried, dug up, thrown in a river. A monk fished him out and hid the body. Within weeks, Romans whispered that the corpse was performing miracles. Rome's reaction to all this was not admiration. By August, 7 months after the trial, a mob deposed Stephen and threw him in prison. He was strangled in his cell. Pope counter: we're going to need a bigger counter. Next came Romanus, 4 months, then Theodore II, who reigned for 20 days and spent basically all the 20 fixing this. He recovered Formosus's body, redressed it in vestments, and reburied it with full honours in St. Peter's. Formosus burial count 5. A record that stands to this day. Then Pope John IX formally annulled the entire corpse trial. He also passed a new church law: you may not put dead people on trial. That is a real rule that exists because it needed to. Happy ending? No. In 904, the papacy went to Sergius III, who had personally been at the corpse trial on the prosecution side, and loved it. Sergius annulled the annulment. Formosus officially guilty again. He even put a plaque on Stephen's tomb praising his justice. The church eventually let the whole thing quietly drop, and Formosus stayed where Theodore buried him. Probably. Somewhere in all this, the deacon from the trial presumably went home, lay down, and stared at the ceiling for the rest of his life. The lesson, as always: if your legal strategy requires exhuming the defendant, drop the case. Subscribe. Unlike a papacy in the 890s, it lasts.